The first item arrived at 11:42 p.m. I remember the time because I had been watching the backroom clock and wondering whether I had made a mistake taking the job. The building had been closed for 11 years. The front door was locked. The public counter was empty. The post office had no internet, no customers, no staff on the public side, and no reason, in any ordinary sense, to still be receiving mail. Then the small bell wired to the wooden drop tray rang once. Not loudly, not dramatically, just one clean, practical ring, the way a service bell rings when a customer has placed something on the counter and expects the clerk to do her work. I walked from the ledger desk to the public counter. There was a parcel in the tray. It was wrapped in brown paper, tied with string, and addressed in fountain pen to Box 41, Kamishimokawa Branch Post Office. In the upper left corner, the sender had written, Yamamoto, Box 17. In the upper right corner, in the same careful hand, was a date, Showa 47, May 3. I was 63 years old. I had worked 41 years for Japan Post. I had handled mail that arrived late, mail that arrived damaged, mail that arrived after the sender had died, and once, in 1994, a postcard that had been trapped in the bottom seam of a canvas sack for 13 years. Mail can be delayed. Mail can take routes no person intended. Mail can outlive the mood in which it was written. So I did what 41 years inside the postal system had trained me to do. I did not scream. I did not open the parcel. I did not ask who had placed it there. I lifted it from the tray, carried it to the back room, weighed it on both scales, calculated the appropriate 1972 postage, franked it with the red Kamishimokawa postmark, entered it in the ledger, and placed it in the outbound bin behind the building. That was the first item I processed at the night counter. It was not the last. My name is Keiko Asano. I am writing this on a Saturday afternoon at my sister's kitchen table in Asahikawa. My sister is at the supermarket. The tea beside me has gone cold. The light outside is the flat gray-yellow light Hokkaido gets near the end of winter, when the snow has begun to soften at the edges but the spring has not yet committed itself. I am writing on the backs of pre-printed receipt slips I took from the supply cupboard at the Kamishimokawa Branch Post Office. I do not know what I intend to do with these pages. Perhaps I will keep them. Perhaps I will place them in Box 88 before my Tuesday shift begins. Perhaps they will be collected in one of the staff absent intervals. And perhaps, eventually, some clerk I will never meet will weigh these pages, frank them, log them, and place them in an outbound bin of their own. I am not afraid of that possibility. That may be the reason I am writing. The job listing said, night counter clerk, 6 hours, 4 nights weekly, no lifting, no customer-facing sales, basic Japanese sufficient, retirees encouraged. It was posted in the window of the Shimokawa Community Center, printed on the letterhead of the Kamishimokawa Postal Heritage Trust. There was a phone number at the bottom. The number rang at a woman's house in Asahikawa. Her name was Mrs. Iso. She interviewed me on a Saturday afternoon at her kitchen table over green tea and senbei. She was small, precise, and soft-spoken in the way of someone who had once worked in prefectural government and had never fully stopped speaking in approved phrases. She told me that the Kamishimokawa Branch Post Office was still a legally operational facility under the Continuous Civic Services Clause of the 1994 deregulation framework. She told me the building had been formally decommissioned in 2014. Then she put down her teacup and said, "The building was closed, Mrs. Asano. The counter was not." I remember that very clearly. She said it once, then again. The counter has never been formally closed. At the time, I thought this was an administrative distinction. Postal work is full of administrative distinctions. A depot can be closed to public traffic while remaining active for sorting. A counter can stop selling stamps, but continue to handle registered collection. A rural branch can be consolidated on paper, while boxes remain assigned under older agreements. If you have not worked in the postal system, you may think open and closed are simple words. They are not. I retired in March after 41 years with Japan Post, the last 19 as a senior sorter at the Regional Distribution Center in Sapporo. I had an apartment in Asahikawa that I shared with my older sister. I had a small pension. I had a daughter in Yokohama who called on Sundays and worried that I was becoming lonely in a way I refused to name. I took the contract because the pay was reasonable, the hours suited my insomnia, and because I missed the smell of post offices. That is not a sentimental thing to say. Post offices have a smell. Paper dust, ink, glue, old wood, damp coats, rubber stamps, metal boxes, kerosene heat in winter, and a faint trace of human waiting. I spent my life in that smell. When I retired, my apartment smelled of detergent and rice, and my sister's hand cream, and I found myself missing the institutional air of useful rooms. Mrs. Iso said the building was 40 minutes from my sister's apartment by the local road along the Nyoro River. I would be the only person on the premises from 9 in the evening until 3 in the morning. The trust had a custodian, Mr. Tabuchi, who came on Mondays to handle bin pickup and accounting forms. She said the counter handled approximately 12 to 20 items per shift, all prepaid, all addressed to other post office boxes within the Heritage Network. My job would be to weigh them, frank them, log them, and place them in the outbound bin. The work is light, she said. It suits someone who likes the work for its own sake. That was true of me. I started on a Tuesday. The Kamishimokawa branch post office is a single-story wooden building on a side road off Route 239, set back from the road by a gravel forecourt with a low stone wall and 2 cedar trees planted, according to the plaque by the door, in 1923 to mark the office's opening. The exterior is painted the dark institutional green of old prefectural buildings, faded now toward moss. The sign above the door uses the old characters for post office, hand-painted in white. Inside, the front room is the public counter. There is a wooden ledge polished by 90 years of elbows, 2 scales, a franking machine with a manual lever, a wall of 96 small brass-numbered post boxes behind glass, a single high-backed chair on the staff side of the counter. The back room holds the ledger desk, the sorting table, the supply cupboard, a small kitchen with a kettle, a kerosene heater, a toilet, and a back door that opens onto a fenced yard where the outbound bin sits under a tin roof. The lighting in the public room is fluorescent. The lighting in the back room is incandescent. The floor is wooden and creaks in 3 predictable places. There is no internet. There is a rotary telephone from the mid-1980s, which Mrs. Iso said remained in service because the trust's accountant preferred not to maintain a separate line. There is a railway issue 24-hour clock above the post boxes. There is a smaller wall clock in the back room that, at the time I started, ran 2 minutes fast. Mrs. Iso came on my first shift to walk me through the procedure. She showed me the ledger, a hardbound volume in the old Japan Post format, the kind I had used in my first posting in 1981. Columns for date, time, sender's box number, recipient's box number, item weight in grams, postage applied, and clerk's initials. She showed me the franking machine and the small inked stamp that produced the office's 3-character postmark in red, Kamishimokawa. She showed me both scales. The older one was accurate to 1/10 of a gram but slow. The newer one, which had been new in 1976, was faster but only accurate to 1/2 a gram. The procedure, she said, was to use both and average them when items were heavy. She showed me the supply cupboard. Inside were stamps in denominations no longer in general circulation, postage rate cards from multiple periods, blank ledger pages, and a stack of pre-printed receipt slips. Then she showed me the outbound bin in the yard. It was a galvanized metal trunk with a hinged lid, placed on a low concrete plinth beneath a tin roof. Mr. Tabuchi emptied it on Mondays, she said. Items in the bin were collected and forwarded to the Heritage Network's central exchange in Asahikawa, and then onward. Onward was the word she used. I asked where onward meant. She said, to the appropriate box. That answer satisfied me then. Then Mrs. Iso explained how to receive an item. The building, she said, was unlocked in the legal sense at the start of each shift. The front door remained physically closed. No customer would enter through it. But the inner door between the public counter and the back room was to be left open from the moment I arrived. Items would appear in the small wooden drop tray on the public side of the counter. There was a bell wired to the tray. When the tray's weight changed, the bell would ring. I should not sit at the counter watching for items. I should sit at the ledger desk in the back room with the inner door open. When the bell rang, I should walk to the counter, lift the item from the tray, carry it to the back room, weigh it, frank it, log it, and place it in the outbound bin. Simple, ordinary, postal work. Then she gave one instruction that sounded almost like the other instructions, but not quite. Do not look through the front window onto the forecourt during your shift. She said this in the same tone she had used to explain the rate cards. I asked why. The night counter operates more smoothly when the clerk does not look out the window. I waited. She added, the angle of the streetlight and the reflectivity of the glass can make the work difficult for new staff. The curtain stays closed. Do not open it. A person outside postal work might have found this strange. I had worked in institutions for 41 years. Institutions have curtains no one opens, drawers no one uses, boxes no one reassigns, stamps kept long after the rates expire. You can spend a career surrounded by rules whose reasons are dead and still perform useful work. I nodded. Mrs. Iso then told me about the patron list. It was kept in a small black notebook in the top drawer of the ledger desk. It contained 73 names. I should not need to consult it, she said, but if I did, I would find it accurate. The trust keeps it current, she said. I asked whether I should memorize the names. No, she said. You are not required to know the customers. You are required to process the mail. That answer pleased me. I had always believed a good postal worker handles the item, not the life attached to it. Mrs. Iso said good luck, put on her coat, and left through the back door. I watched her cross the yard and go through the side gate to her car on the road. I did not watch the forecourt. That was my first shift. Nothing happened. I sat at the ledger desk and read a paperback. The bell did not ring. At 3 a.m, I locked the back door, walked to my car by the side gate, and drove home along the Nyoro River. My sister asked how it was. I told her it was the easiest work I had ever done. The second shift was on Thursday. At 11:42 p.m., the bell rang. I went to the counter. The parcel was in the tray. Yamamoto, Box 17 to Box 41, Showa 47, May 3. I lifted it. It weighed about 300 grams by hand. I carried it to the back room and placed it on the older scale, 312 grams. Then the newer scale, 312.5 grams. I averaged them, consulted the rate card for May 1972, and applied 60 yen of postage for a 300-gram parcel traveling within the same prefectural network. I pulled the franking lever. The red Kamishimokawa mark appeared cleanly. I logged the item. 1142. Sender box 17. Recipient box 41. 312.25 grams. 60 yen. Ka. Then I carried it out to the bin, placed it inside, closed the lid, and came back in. Only after I sat down did I think again about the date, but the thought did not trouble me. Mail moves through systems on its own schedule. Items get misplaced, returned, held, redirected. If the Heritage Trust had boxes, archives, and a central exchange, then a 1972 date was unusual, but not impossible. I made a small note in the ledger margin. Outer date, Showa 47, May 3. Then I continued the shift. 3 more items came that night. A letter at 1:23 from box 9 to box 52, dated Showa 47. A postcard at 1:51 from box 34 to box 8, dated Showa 51, October. A small envelope at 2:08 from box 17 to box 41 again, in the same fountain pen, with the same date as the first parcel. I weighed them. I franked them. I logged them. I placed them in the bin. I drove home. On the 3rd shift, the bell rang 7 times. On the 4th, 11. The items were always wrapped or enveloped, always addressed in fountain pen or pencil, and always dated in Showa or Heisei. Never Reiwa. Never the current year. The box numbers were always among the 96 brass slots behind the counter glass. I looked at those boxes once. Only once. Behind each brass number was a small paper slip with a renter's name printed on it. After the first week, I noticed some of the names matched the senders in the ledger. I stopped looking. I decided, without consciously deciding, that the names were not my business. That is not as strange as it sounds. At a post office, curiosity is a form of discourtesy. You handle the letter. You do not ask why it was written. For the first 2 weeks, I told myself the Heritage Trust was running an internal cataloging operation. The dated items were reproductions of historical correspondence. Retired postal workers, their families, or collectors were using the preserved counter for authenticity. Mr. Tabuchi was collecting the outbound bin and forwarding items to the central exchange, where someone read, sorted, archived, or displayed them. I had seen stranger uses of public money. I was being paid to perform a procedure. The procedure was clear. That was enough. In my 3rd week, I noticed 2 things. The first was that Yamamoto, box 17, sent something to box 41 on every shift. Sometimes 2 items. Always the same fountain pen. Always the same paper. Always dates from Showa 47, 1972, between April and August. By the end of my 3rd week, I had processed 23 items from box 17 to box 41. I had not looked at the name slip for box 41. I had not opened the black notebook. I did not want to know. The second thing happened on a Thursday at 12:11 a.m. I was sitting at the ledger desk when I felt cold air on the back of my neck. There had never been a draft there before. I looked up automatically, the way a person looks toward unexpected movement before remembering she has been told not to. Through the open inner door, across the front counter, through a narrow gap between the closed curtain and the front window frame, I saw someone standing on the forecourt. A man. He wore an old postal uniform, dark wool with brass buttons. He held a leather satchel at his side. The streetlight was behind him. The cedar trees were behind the streetlight. His face was not visible. He stood facing the building, still, waiting. I looked at him for what I later estimated to be 3 seconds. Then I looked down at the ledger. I want to record accurately what I felt. I was not afraid. I felt the small professional embarrassment of an employee who has violated procedure. Mrs. Iso had told me not to look out the front window. I had looked. I had not opened the curtain, but I had looked through the gap. The figure was almost certainly part of the Heritage Trust's operation. A volunteer, a reenactor, someone creating period atmosphere. This is what I thought. I am not making myself wiser after the fact. At 12:14, the bell rang. I went to the counter. There was a parcel in the tray. I did not look through the window. I lifted the parcel, carried it to the back room, weighed it, franked it, logged it, placed it in the outbound bin, and returned to the desk. The figure did not enter my mind again until I was driving home. Even then, I did not mention him to my sister. On the Saturday morning of that week, I drove to Asahikawa to deliver paperwork to Mrs. Iso. We sat at her kitchen table. I told her the work was going well. Then I said I had a question about one of the senders. There is a great deal of mail from box 17 to box 41, I said. Is that normal traffic for the Heritage Network, or is it part of a cataloging project I should know about? Mrs. Iso put down her teacup. Until that moment, she had addressed me warmly. Now she said, Mrs. Asano. It was the first time she had used my surname since the interview. The patron list is in the top drawer of the ledger desk. The list will answer most questions. You do not need to ask me. You will find that the answers are not surprising. I asked her who Yamamoto was. She did not hesitate. Mr. Yamamoto was the counter clerk at Kamishimokawa from 1968 to 1974. He retired in the spring of 1974 and moved to Hakodate, where he died in 1989. Box 17 was his counter box, the one clerks used for personal correspondence. I said nothing. Box 41 was rented by Miss Suzuki, she continued. She worked at the same counter as Mr. Yamamoto's relief between 1971 and 1973. He was, by all accounts, and to the considerable distress of his wife, in love with her. Miss Suzuki returned to her family in Otaru in 1973 without saying goodbye. Mr. Yamamoto wrote to her at box 41 for the remainder of his time at Kamishimokawa, twice a week, sometimes 3 times. The letters were never collected. Box 41's renter never came back to the counter. Mrs. Iso lifted her cup. She drank tea. I said, but Mr. Yamamoto died in 1989. Yes. And Miss Suzuki? Died in 2006. I looked at my own cup. The tea had gone pale. Mrs. Iso said, the entitlement of a box renter to receive postal service does not terminate with the renter's death. It terminates with the closure of the box. The boxes at Kamishimokawa have never been closed. I let that sentence sit between us. She continued. The Heritage Clause was negotiated in 1994 to ensure that no postal box in the prefecture would be administratively closed without the express written consent of its renter or designated successor. The trust was established to hold the unsigned boxes. Mr. Yamamoto's wife signed his box over to the trust in 1990. Miss Suzuki's family never closed box 41. Both boxes are open. Both are entitled to send and receive. I said, who places the items in the tray? Mrs. Iso said, the senders. But the senders are... Yes, she said. Then she added, this is why the curtain is closed. I sat at her kitchen table for a long time. The house was quiet. Outside, a truck passed on the road with chains on its tires. Mrs. Iso looked at me with no special expression. She had told me what the work was during the interview. She was repeating it now in language I had not been ready to hear. I am sorry I was not clearer, she said. The trust prefers clerks to adjust to the work in their own time. Some adjust faster than others. You have adjusted within 3 weeks. That is faster than average. Most clerks ask the question at 6 weeks. One asked at 4 months. One has never asked. I asked, can I quit? Of course. She said it so quickly that I believed her. You may give notice today. The trust will pay you to the end of the month. There will be no record beyond ordinary payroll. Or you may continue, in which case the work will be the same work it has been. Then she asked me a question. Are the items being weighed correctly? Yes. Are they being franked correctly? Yes. Are they being logged? Yes. Are they reaching the outbound bin? Yes. Then the service is being provided, she said. That is all the work is. I drove home along the Nyoro River. I did not give notice. I went back on Tuesday. I want to record what I was thinking, because I do not want anyone, including my daughter, to imagine I was hypnotized or coerced. I had spent 41 years inside the Japanese postal system. That system is one of the most reliable, exact, and personally meaningful institutions in the country. I had handled an estimated 2.5 million items of mail. I had seen letters arrive after weddings, after funerals, after divorces, after houses were demolished. I had seen people cry over postcards and shrug at registered notices that should have frightened them. The postal system does not, as a rule, fail to deliver. It delays. It holds. It works through whatever interval is required. What Mrs. Iso described was the same ethic extended past the ordinary boundary of life. I did not, sitting in her kitchen, begin to believe in ghosts. I do not, writing this, believe in ghosts. I believe in postal service. I believe that an entitlement remains an entitlement until it is formally closed. I believe that a box left open remains open. I believe that a counter never formally closed is, in all procedural senses that matter, still operating. The first Tuesday after that conversation, the bell rang at 10:06. There was a letter from box 17 to box 41 in the tray. I weighed it. I franked it. I logged it. I placed it in the bin. I worked through October. Then November. The counter traffic increased. By the end of November, I processed between 30 and 40 items per shift. Yamamoto remained the most prolific sender, but others appeared. Box 9 to box 52, box 34 to box 8, box 62 to box 23, box 4 to box 71. I still did not read the box slips. I still did not open the black notebook. The customers' names were not my business. In formal counter training, the customer side is the omote, the front. The work side is the ura, the back. The clerk lives in the ura. The customer lives in the omote. The counter exists between them for a reason. In the second week of December, 3 things happened. The first was that the ledger began completing itself, not in ink, in pencil. At the start of a shift, I would find my initials penciled lightly in the clerk column for the first 2 or 3 entries of the night. The times would already be written, the sender and recipient boxes left blank, the weights blank, the postage blank, only the time and my initials. The handwriting was mine. The pressure was mine. The slight rightward slant in the K of my second initial was mine. The items had not yet arrived, but when they did, they arrived within 2 minutes of the penciled time, which was the difference between the front room clock and the back room clock. At first, I erased the pencil before writing the entry in pen. By the end of the month, I stopped erasing. I inked over it. The second thing was that the back room clock stopped running fast. I checked it against my wristwatch on the second Tuesday of December. They agreed to the second. For 10 weeks, the backroom clock had been 2 minutes fast. I had used that difference privately, the way one uses harmless imperfections in a familiar workplace. Then the imperfection was gone. The third thing happened on December 11th. I walked from the back room to the counter to retrieve an item. As I passed the wall of post boxes, I saw something in box 41, a folded paper, behind the glass. The slot had been empty for every shift since I started. Now there was a small folded paper inside. The name slip read Suzuki. I went to the counter. I lifted the item from the tray. I carried it to the back room, weighed it, franked it, logged it, and placed it in the bin. When I returned, the folded paper was still in box 41. I did not open the box. I had the staff key. The panel opens from the back. I could have opened all 96 boxes if I had wished. I did not. The contents of a box are not the clerk's business. On Thursday, the folded paper was gone. I have no record of removing it. I did not remove it. Mrs. Iso called me that Sunday. She asked how the shifts were going. I told her the volume had increased. I told her about the penciled initials. I told her the backroom clock had corrected itself. I reported these facts as I would have reported a procedural irregularity to a supervisor at the Sapporo distribution center. Mrs. Iso said, "Yes, only that." Then, the pre-completion usually begins between the third and fourth month. You are slightly early. The clock correction usually accompanies it. What does that mean? The counter is integrating you. I repeated the phrase, integrating me. The night counter operates as a continuous service, she said. Clerks come and go. The counter does not. The procedures it requires are stable. Once a clerk has performed those procedures for a sufficient number of shifts, the counter begins to anticipate the clerk's contributions. Anticipate? As a courtesy, not as a possession. She said the penciled initials would stop appearing if I asked them to stop. How do I ask? You form the intention, she said. The counter is responsive to clerks' preferences. I thought about this. Most clerks, she added, find after the first month of integration that the pre-completion is a relief. Some ask it to stop. The counter accommodates either way. I asked her about box 41. Mrs. Iso was silent for a moment. That I cannot speak to. The boxes are private. The trust does not inquire into their contents. If you saw paper in box 41, and later the paper was gone, then the paper was collected. By Miss Suzuki, the box was checked, the contents were collected, and the box is empty again. The trust does not name the collector. Your role is to receive items at the counter and forward them. Collection at the receiving end is not your role. I said I understood, and I did. Collection happened in staff-absent intervals, perhaps between shifts, perhaps while I was in the backyard placing items in the bin, perhaps while I was in the toilet or making tea. The box renter collected without my witnessing it, because my role was not to witness. My role was the interface. The omote was not my side. I worked through December. I worked through the New Year holidays. The trust paid double time for the 3 nights I covered between December 30 and January 2nd. Mrs. Iso called personally to thank me. On New Year's Eve, I processed 44 items. For the first time, several were addressed not from box to box, but from a box to a name and a place outside the heritage network. Houses and apartments in Otaru, Hakodate, Wakanai, Sendai. I franked them. I logged them. I placed them in the bin. Mr. Tabuchi took the bin on Monday. I do not know whether they arrived. I want to be clear about that. I have not asked. My role is the receiving end. In the second week of January, I noticed that I had begun walking a circuit at the start of each shift, from the inner door to the counter, along the counter to the wall of boxes, along the boxes to the front door, then back. I had not been instructed to do this. I had not been aware I had started. I noticed only because on a Thursday night I saw my reflection in the glass of box 41 and realized I was walking a route my feet already knew. I stopped. I thought, I do not remember beginning this. On Saturday, I asked Mrs. Iso. She said, yes. She said the circuit was a presence check. The counter prefers the staff member to walk through the front room at the start of each shift so the boxes can register the clerk's presence on the omote side. She said most clerks notice this between 4 and 7 months. You are slightly ahead again, she said. You are a very experienced postal worker. The counter recognizes this. It is more comfortable in your presence than it has been with some clerks. This is not a problem. When does integration finish? I asked. Mrs. Iso was quiet for long enough that I heard her kettle begin to click. Integration does not finish in a way that has a date, she said. It is a gradient. After approximately 1 year of regular shifts, most clerks find that the counter, and they have arrived at a working relationship. After approximately 3 years, most clerks no longer think about the differences between the night counter and an ordinary counter. After approximately 7 years, the clerks who remain describe the work as more comfortable than the day work they previously had. How many have remained? None who have worked more than 3 years has left the position. 2 have died. One is the woman who has worked the counter for the last 19 years. She is in her 80s and lives in the village. She works 2 shifts a week. She is the senior night clerk. You will meet her in spring, at the annual training day. I asked whether I was required to continue. No. The contract renews in 3-month increments. You may end it at any renewal. Then she said something that stayed with me. The work is being done well. The counter has reported, in the small ways it reports such things, that the items are weighed correctly, franked correctly, logged correctly, and placed in the bin promptly. The traffic has increased. We take this as a sign that the senders are comfortable with the current clerk. The counter does not increase traffic for clerks who are uncomfortable. It moderates. I thanked her. She said, "I will see you on the training day." I worked through January and February. By mid-February, I was processing 50 items per shift. The senders continued to diversify. I was logging mail from 68 of the 96 boxes. I had finally opened the black notebook in the top drawer and counted the names. 73. 73 patrons. 73 open boxes. Some names I recognized from the ledger. Some I did not. Some had titles written beside them: postmaster, counter clerk, relief clerk, sorter, railway mail liaison, custodian. The earliest date beside a name was 1923. The most recent date was not filled in. There was a blank line near the end of the list. I closed the notebook. I told myself the blank line was for administrative use. By then, I had stopped erasing the penciled initials. I arrived, saw the first 3 or 4 entries prepared, and inked over them as the items came. There was no practical reason not to. The handwriting was mine. The work was mine. The pencil simply reached the line before the pen. In February, I noticed I no longer looked at the clock, not because time had become unimportant, because I knew it. I knew approximately when the bell would ring. I would already be sitting with the ledger open to the right line and the pen uncapped. I would stand, walk to the counter, lift, weigh, frank, log, and return to the desk in a rhythm that felt less like habit than fluency. Not expertise, fluency. The counter had begun to help me perform the work, the way a kitchen helps a cook who has used it for 30 years, the way a sorting room helps a sorter, the way a route helps the carrier walking it. I also noticed I had begun to bow when placing items in the outbound bin, a small bow, not formal, the kind of acknowledgement bow one gives a colleague when handing off a task. I had not been instructed to do it, but when I noticed, I did not feel embarrassed. The handoff was a handoff. The handoff deserved the bow. The figure on the forecourt returned to my noticing, on February 22nd. The bell rang at 12:41. I went to the counter. As I lifted the item from the tray, I was aware, through the narrow gap between curtain and frame, of someone standing outside. I did not look directly. I did not need to. An old postal uniform, leather satchel, streetlight behind him. The item was from box 17 to box 41. The date was Showa 47, June 8th. Mr. Yamamoto had brought another letter. I carried it back, weighed, franked, logged, placed in the bin, bowed, returned inside. My heart rate did not change. My hand did not shake. My judgment of the weight remained correct. That was what had changed since October. The figure was no longer a figure. He was traffic. He was a customer using the omote. His face was not my business. On March 7th at 1:54 in the morning, the bell rang for the 43rd item of the shift. I went to the counter. There was a small letter in the tray. Sender, box 17, Yamamoto. But the recipient was not box 41. The recipient was box 88. At first, I did not understand what I was seeing. I lifted the letter and carried it to the back room. It weighed 11 grams. I consulted the rate card. I franked it. Then I lowered my pen toward the ledger. The line was blank. No pencil. No pre-completion. For the first time in 2 months, the counter had not prepared the entry. I looked at the envelope again. Box 88. There was no name slip behind Box 88's glass. I had never processed an item to Box 88. I knew, because I had read the black notebook 2 weeks earlier, that Box 88 was not on the patron list. I sat at the ledger desk holding the letter. The sender's hand was Yamamoto's. I knew it now without needing to compare. The recipient's box notation was written in a different hand, a hand with a slight rightward slant in the second character. Mine. The envelope was addressed by Yamamoto to Box 88, but the box number had been written in my hand. I turned the letter over. The date was Showa 47, June 12, 4 days after the previous Yamamoto letter, exactly on schedule. I sat there for what I later estimated was 6 minutes. I did not log the item. I did not place it in the bin. I held it. Then I thought, very clearly, the counter is offering me a box. The thought did not feel foreign. It came in my own voice, the same voice I had used to run a sorting room for 19 years, the voice that knew when a tray was out of order before the label was visible. The voice that told junior sorters not to stack wet mail under heavy parcels. The voice that, since October, had been describing every irregularity at Kamishimokawa in procedural terms, because procedural terms were the truest language I had. Box 88 was empty. The senior night clerk, the woman in her 80s, had Box 87. I knew that, because I had seen her name in the black notebook, and had closed the book immediately after seeing it. The next box was 88. Mr. Yamamoto had been the counter clerk and had Box 17. Miss Suzuki had been his relief and had Box 41. Clerks had boxes. Former clerks kept boxes. Boxes were not closed without consent. The counter had operated since 1923. The clerks became patrons. The patrons became senders. The senders wrote to the next clerks. The counter staffed itself through its own memory. I felt gratitude. That is the word. Not fear, not triumph, not surrender. Gratitude. The kind one feels when a colleague whose respect one has not consciously sought leaves a small note saying the work was done well. The counter, after 5 months of correct work, had offered me a box. I had not asked. I had not signed, but I had inked over the penciled initials for 2 months. The inking had been consent. The consent had been integration. The integration was always going to end at a box. I thought about my sister sleeping in Asahikawa, my daughter in Yokohama, who calls on Sundays, my pension, my apartment, my 41 years in the postal system, Yamamoto, standing on the forecourt with his satchel, Suzuki, collecting from Box 41 in the staff absent interval, the senior night clerk working 2 shifts a week in her 80s, the other clerks who never left after 3 years, Mrs. Esso saying the traffic increases when the senders are comfortable. I thought, Box 88 is my box. Then I logged the letter, 154, sender Box 17, recipient Box 88, 11 grams, postage applied, K.A. I placed it in the bin. I bowed. I returned inside and finished the shift. When I drove home along the Nyoro River, the river was frozen at the edges and dark in the center. The road was empty. I parked outside my sister's apartment at 3:45 and sat in the car for several minutes before going inside. I slept until noon. Now I am writing this. The radiator in my sister's kitchen has come on 3 times while I have written. Each time it came on when my hand paused. Each time it went quiet again when I resumed. This may be coincidence. I am noting it. I am not afraid of it. I will work Tuesday. I will work Thursday. I will work through spring. In May, I will attend the training day. I will meet the senior night clerk. I will bow to her. She will bow to me. We will drink tea, and there will be things neither of us needs to say, because the counter will have already said them in its own way. I will work through summer and into winter. At some point, the items from box 88 will begin to appear in the ledger of another clerk at another counter. I do not know who I will write to. I do not know what year will be written in the upper right corner of my envelopes when they are finally processed. I do not know whether I will still be alive when I begin sending them. I find that I do not need to know. The counter has been a small, reliable institution in a small, forgotten town since 1923. The work of such institutions is to outlast the people who staff them, to honor the entitlements they have accepted, and to continue service until service is formally closed. The Kamishimokawa counter has never been formally closed. Neither, it seems, have its clerks. My sister will be home soon. I am going to fold these receipt slips and put them in the inside pocket of my work coat. On Tuesday, before the shift begins, I think I will place them in box 88 through the staff side panel. They will be collected in a staff absent interval. They will go where they go. The omote is not my side. The ura is my side. The work is the work. The kettle is whistling. I am going to stop writing now. Before I do, I want to record one final thing. Just now, while I was folding the first page, the rotary telephone in my sister's kitchen rang. My sister does not own a rotary telephone. There is no telephone in this room except my mobile, which is on the table beside the tea and has not lit up. The sound came from the hallway closet, where she keeps winter coats and old boxes from our mother's apartment. It rang 3 times, then stopped. I opened the closet because I am a postal worker, and unanswered signals trouble me more than answered ones. There was no telephone inside, only coats, shoe boxes, a broken umbrella, and on the floor, directly beneath the hanging sleeve of my work coat, a small folded paper. It had not been there this morning. I picked it up. On the outside was written, Box 88. My name was not written, only the box. Inside, in fountain pen, in the hand I know now as Mr. Yamamoto's, were 4 words. Welcome to the counter. There was no date, no signature, no postage. I have placed it beside the receipt slips. I will not show it to my sister. I will not call Mrs. Iso. I will not ask whether this is normal. I think I know the answer. The counter has acknowledged the clerk. The clerk has received the acknowledgement. The service continues.